So, hello, Brigit, and thank you for taking the time to talk about your wonderful new offering, the what was once the birth and death class, and has, for in my awareness, it has expanded and unfolded. And I was so curious to know more about it. And I was kind of bugging you. Do you have a video for me? Do you have any more information where I could listen and get a sense of it all? And so here we are, and we are recording a video about it.
Thank you so much for asking so that we can create this.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm telepathically thinking, but it's wonderful and worthwhile, and just come and you'll find out. It's much better to words.
And there are people who are receiving and understanding and are more like guided by the spirit. And yeah, I was one of those people. I was guided to your work, and I am continuously in awe how you really are, like, for me, walking into these unknown areas. And when I was thinking about like the birth and the death class, what I noticed in my awareness, these two immense portals where we as souls and humans are walking through. And I don't know, should we start with death or with birth?
Well, I was just thinking that the evolution of the way that I learned body work was going deeper and deeper into the somatic experience. And in the United States, some of the people in the bodywork field, as they went deeper and deeper, recognized that birth trauma affected somebody for the rest of their lives. And so somebody like Ray Castellino spent 40 years dropping down and down and down into the birth experience. When I came along to start studying it, and I was starting to feel a little bit activated in these circles because I was thinking, but I had an easy birth, fairly easy birth. So why so much focus on the birth? There's so much more. And having taken the somatic experiencing training, my eyes were open to so many different types of trauma, the war traumas and everything. And a teacher came over to me one day. We had a little conversation, and she said, Brigit, most of us in this field, that is the most significant trauma we've experienced was the birth trauma, because they were in the United States or on the West Coast, and they had lived a much different reality than me arriving as a child of immigrants. So to answer your question, the evolution started with birth, and then I recognized we don't have death classes in the bodywork field or in somatics. The focus only after many years was on death, like the advanced SE classes finally get to some death imprints, but it's actually wrapped up all along in the most difficult symptoms and states. And so we needed death classes as well.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I was interested in finding a way to have practitioners have a short course instead of yet another 5-year program or something like that, to get through a short course on let's work with adults. That's the first half of our program. And the second half is death and then birth now, because also in the fall we have death and then birth in the spring. So it fits in the school year like that.
So the level 1 to 7 is like the basics, working with grown-ups, and then the like walking into autumn, connecting to death or understanding, and then going round the corner to spring, there's new birth, new life. Oh, that's so wonderful. I wonder, in, I don't know, in Germany and where I've been living so far, there's not a wonderful culture around death. There's a lot of fear, and I imagine that a lot of people, when they hear, oh, death class, they're like, oh, no, 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 don't go to the death class. It sounds unknown or maybe even scary. What would you say is surprisingly different when one dares to go there, to enter this land and discover?
Incredibly enough that life is strengthened, and
Oh,
that, every day is precious because you are alive, and a connection with eternal life and something deeper than that which is ephemeral becomes available. Death, from my Latvian perspective, is part of the cycle of life, and it's such an earth-based culture that everything, rises, blooms, harvests, etc., falls into the winter. And so the possibility of holding the alive ones as precious, and then also having right relationship with those who pass away. And as we're awakening to more and more of a thin veil and having access to ancestral conversations, or dearly departed ones actually can stay in relationship with us, that is a type of living that is so rich, really.
mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
once one dares to say, like, can I stay present to this? Can I pay attention?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a wonderful teacher, and once she passed, I immediately felt this without getting an email or anything. I just felt her crossing over. And then for a while, she was so present, almost more present than before. And now and again, I feel her presence and I say, "Oh, hi, so good to see you or feel you."
Yeah,
And that's kind of wonderful to have a kind of relationship that could be ongoing.
exactly. And when there's a trauma, however, so that you're describing a healthy range of regulation death.
Mm,
When we have a trauma, we have hyper or hypo experiences that go along with that, or double binds that
mm,
are intense, hot double binds, or cold double binds where things begin to disappear. And when you have a traumatic death, there's a shock in it of some kind, or unfinished threat response bound into it. And so, of course, we want practitioners who are able to stay with the subject over and over and over again. In our modules 8 through 11, that's 4 different times for 3 days. We gather together, and during every single day, we will have a practical which has the subject somebody died. And it goes from adults down towards child, then it goes from other closer in towards self.
mm,
And so we have the titrated little pieces of, we will visit death, and you can refuse. You can deepen in if you and your partner have the capacity to meet something like a wave of experience that's a little more intense. Or you could say, huh, right distance is very far away. I'm not available for this subject. What else could we do today? We have
mm.
we have no built into every single practical.
So there's safety and there's choice.
Mm.
And what the question that arises for me is, if I'm a practitioner and I have already learned level 1 to 7 or
Yeah.
1 to 4, or like I did,
Yes.
um, where would I meet in my clients or within myself these unresolved death imprints? How would I see them, feel them? What are they, and how can we become aware?
Yeah. So when we're working with physiology, when we're working with people's states and symptoms, we have a range of regulation where we're able to be present with self, and maybe things get faster or more slow or medium. We have the ability to flow along with life. Hopefully, some of us have this, and sometimes that range gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And sometimes it just collapses, and we go into places of speed or intensity. or have a sudden response. We may have a wormhole straight to a certain state, or we may drop off down into the lower ones, into a freezy type of a place. And we have 5 depths of freeze that we describe in this program. And there are different experiences that go along with each one and different thresholds as we're leaving each state. The truth about freeze is that it means the system believes death is imminent.
Mm.
And so freeze is beyond a death threshold. And so in the program, we also work with threshold dynamics. What kind of a threshold am I arriving at in my life where my system believes death is wrapped into that? We work with mechanical, interpersonal, and environmental experiences. What does that mean? Mechanical is like, did a car accident?
Mm.
My body believed that it was coming close to death. Interpersonal, did another human, were they involved? And did that bring me close to death? That'll leave an imprint of a certain kind for me to possibly meet over and over as I'm dealing with people, even if logically it makes no sense that I believe I'm coming close to death, even though a person's just standing next to me. But there are certain things that trigger my security system to say that equals death. And so we learn how to work with that. And then also environmental, when there are chemicals or other things that are around in the environment that lead my being to believe that death is involved. We begin to feel for and recognize what are the circumstances that have a
Mm.
security system set the alarms to high alert, and sometimes high alert means I'm gone, I'm unavailable for presence.
Mm. Um, I'm walking back a little bit to the 5 stages of freeze, because what I noticed when I looked around in the German speaking world of more somatically inclined people, there is more awareness of fight flight, and the upper survival states going up and being turned on, somehow more activated. But I found there's almost a certain unawareness for the freeze, because freeze is so perfect to not see, to hide, and to disappear, of course. And so I wonder for you, where is there a threshold between freeze and death, or is death just totally linked to freeze, to all stages of freeze? There's a flavor of it and it's getting stronger and more intense.
Yeah. First of all, the maps were created while we had masculine domination and out of balance, where there's large muscle fighting or fleeing as the part of the culture that's in our awareness. The freeze is in the yin or feminine shadow.
Mm.
And most women and children freeze because they don't have the large muscle power to fight or flee. And so the freeze can remain in the shadow forever in that type of a culture.
Yeah. I guess that we are living, the whole Western world is partially living in a freeze, a frozen state. And it's so functional and it's so camouflaged, so no one will talk about it. But there's just a giant part of us not living, not breathing, not moving.
Yeah. And so what has been in that type of culture, appropriate behavior is having a mental range that's large, especially left brain mental range, which is part of a threat response, is to understand and figure out everything. Left brain, left brain, left brain, left brain. And then those of us who begin to have the other side of the brain available, that's where the somatics live, right brain experiential, deeper implicit body experiences, everything that is subcortical down below your frontal lobe awareness of things. That's a rich, vast landscape. And so beyond fight and flight, when the security system recognizes it has default settings, this is not a mental choice. It's deeper in the brain that is making the decision, we will collapse now. So anybody, if you're still judging yourself about collapsing, there's nothing else you could have done. It's a nervous system default setting. And then as we rehabilitate that frozen one, as that one comes up and out of the levels of freeze, you have a chance to come back into life, which is scary and dangerous. And we learn as practitioners how to recognize, oh, we slow down right here for no new injury because that's scary and dangerous to come out of freeze. The system went there for a very good reason. It doesn't want to come out because you could unwittingly, also as a practitioner, create the exact similar injury called recapitulation because it's in the field. And so you get to recognize, ooh, how do I not re-injure them as they're coming out?
So when there's an unfinished death imprint that I bring as a client, a practitioner who is not familiar with this could just go into that and become the one who kills me again, or pushes
Exactly.
me too far, or invades something that brings me to death, an inner or emotional death or spiritual death.
And for all of practitioners, great intentions.
Mhm.
If you don't know what to do, you fall right into it. And so this is also practice, practice, practice. How do we do? And in our program, we ask for 20-minute exchanges over and over and over and over again so that people get used to this landscape.
Mm.
Yeah.
And for a practitioner who starts walking into death or into this landscape, becoming familiar with it, what would change in their work, in the quality of the field that they can offer a client?
My first thought is embodied presence. Oh, that's here. Welcome. You know, I'll stay stable for you and with you. I'll stay right here with you, as opposed to what might be a spiritual bypass or a technique or a tool or a, quick tap dance. Like, let's do that with that, or let's change your thought right now. The embodied presence of, oh, I recognize what is happening with you right now. I'll stay with you as we go through this territory. And I'll stay with you at the beginning, in the middle, and the end, and the integration. We'll stay together on the way through. Or recognizing no capacity, I'll help redirect so we can stabilize because we don't have capacity for this today.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, The what I ask myself right now is, you mentioned different death imprints that we or our clients could hold. Um, is there also something like r- rejecting life, or not being able to say yes, maybe during birth or afterwards, or
Yeah. That's a perfect segue into the birth classes because not only are they about creation dynamics, but they're a bit more advanced than that because creation can be overcoupled with and linked with, bound together with, and meshed with death or injuries of some kind at the beginning of the timeline. And so we're moving into the spring birth classes right now. And as you have, or not we are, but I'm beginning to include them, as you have creation dynamics mixed with the mechanical, environmental, or interpersonal imprints that can affect the rest of your entire life. Because so far people haven't been able to reach that, and they'll just say, yeah, how you are or who you are, or, oh, sorry, you've got the chronic experience of that. Nobody could reach that.
Mm.
It's the greatest thing to be able to include time travel, to include the earliest parts of your timeline, and eventually, even before your timeline. Just yesterday, I worked with someone with many past lives that were similar, that affected the first cell. Um, we had 18 of them. And so being able to begin to work with that also is eventually going to be part of our spirit classes, but right now it's woven in to the death and birth classes.
Mhm. And what I'm also wondering is, um, when a soul wants to come in to become human, to start living in a body, and there are remnants of violent death or hard experiences on the other side. um how would this show up, maybe even before birth, and an intuitive mother or more aware mother would feel there's something that I'm struggling with, or we are struggling with? What is it? What is it? What's going on there?
Yeah. Yeah. Four of our other main categories that I like to look at are time, space, self, and subject. Where is the trauma bound? It could be all of them. And so slowly, slowly to differentiate out, what are we working with? Who is this? Etc. And that's the self piece where you're saying, can a young one already come in where the self already has bound together with the subject or time? They're not in this time, they're dragging along other things from other lifetimes. The intuitive ones and the mystical shamanic ones begin to have access to that. I believe more and more and more humans on the planet are going in this direction of, it's been called Homo luminous or Homo noeticus, the new evolution of human on the new earth, the ability to have movement through material and time in a way that never has been before on the 3D planet where everything just was matter. Now we have so much more access to fluidity within spirit. And I've worked with some teachers who say, oh, just acknowledge this is this lifetime, that was that lifetime. And if it were that, way. However, once you would like to reach physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, energetic, relational, or PEMSR categories, once you'd like to say, hey, could we, through all of those, work with one being? Yeah, we actually can over time begin to separate out and differentiate out and process through threat response to completion. And this self then becomes different from that self. And the soul level gets to say, ooh, look at that. They're not bound and enmeshed. They begin to differentiate. That brings a completely different embodiment of who you can be still in this lifetime, because you don't have the leaden drag into history that all of us have been working with forever.
Mm.
Mhm.
I'm listening to, like maybe the old, more limited consciousness and the more new earth expanded. I see it sometimes like before we were walking like through a tunnel, and we couldn't see what was behind. We couldn't see far ahead. We were just here in this moment, everything forgotten. The soul is somewhere, a higher self, I don't know where. And I think or feel your work is so much about, well, things are changing. Our consciousness is like opening. So all of a sudden we feel, oh, my past lifetime, or oh, my birth, or my gestation, the first cell. We feel we are connected to these stages of ourselves, and they are not back there in the past. They are right here, right now. And so it makes a lot of sense to me that we, as practitioners, that you are inviting us to like walk past these old boundaries and become fluent or become more expanded in our work, so we can welcome clients that bring these experiences.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the for those who would rather not hear this, so it tends to be about inclusion and upgrading instead of boundaries and cutting off, which is an old way of like shamanically cord cut, you are gone. When does that work? Blessings upon that working for you. And when is it possible to begin to upgrade that type of experience? When I entered this work, I had cut off all ancestors. I just arrived on the planet like a star seed, and I don't know these people or something like that. So the ability to slowly over time, for me, it's been through a family constellations path, and then shadow constellations and karmic constellations and dark and light cosmic constellations. These things that I've been having fun with have been informing my ability to have access to that through somatic work, and also informing how I can bring it experientially into my classes with an alchemical alignment viewpoint.
Mm,
So the
yeah.
inclusion and the upgrading actually feels like a beautiful path to walk.
Hmm. And it's maybe sometimes our hope that there's like a button I can push or a cord that I could cut, and then it's all resolved in a flash. But um, just like in our bodies, everything in our physical bodies, everything is connected. If I have a pain over here, mostly I cannot just cut it off and get rid of. I have to meet it and then allow it to go to through this whole process. Like you said, it's upgrading and coming to a state of resolution, maybe.
Sometimes you need to cut it out because you've already gone to the 10th level of infection or inflammation and death and
Yeah.
whatever needs to go. Then there is the somatic work that goes along with that type of surgery or something like that. At this current state of our culture, emergency medicine is so incredibly necessary. And the request would be to pay attention to things while they are subtle, because that is when they don't need to go all the way to the 10th level of
Mm.
need for emergency care.
And even if they are, and we need the quick help of another kind of medicine, then we have the tools to do the inner part of that, and not
Yeah,
just
the
stay
complete.
with the wound or the scar. And yeah.
Yeah. Not long for, I envision one day that we will be having, what do you call it? Allopathic medicine together with
Yes,
energy
yes.
work. Because how many surgeries do we have where the energetic lines are cut and the security system no longer can reach the area or below the area, like for every cesarean birth? I would love for people to be able to access their lower torso and their legs again after that experience as
Mm.
part of the integration. And also the mothers to be able to have the oxytocin and the bonding experience with the baby, which doesn't necessarily happen during the surgical birth.
Mm.
And that's all possible with somatic work.
Yeah, it would be wonderful to have somatic people mixed in everywhere, and during through birth, and also the death process and medicine and everywhere. It would be so nice, because I'm totally not against like normal medicine. I just feel it's just a part of something and the other part is missing. And
So
sometimes we just have this part and then that part is missing, but both would be.
just like the mind is part of the orchestra of self, every instrument plays its part, the heart, the belly, the right brain as well as the spiritual inspiration and intuition and your imagination, all of that, they all have parts in the orchestra.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So along the modules, we walked into birth, a little bit further into it. What could be some birth imprints or the field that I was born into? What are the things that we will meet during
Yeah.
birth class?
So the birth class is really from preconception through the first 3 years of life. The death class, we were moving all the way back to about 3 years old. And then the birth class, we start at preconception and then finish around 3. So we have all of life in these few days. It's really, it could be an entire graduate program. There's so much depth and richness behind each day, and we do what we can. And so preconception somatics, like, my goodness, what does that even mean to anybody on this planet at this time? Um, Before I arrive for conception, I already have ancestral dynamics. I have karmic dynamics. I have cosmic dynamics. And what is it like to arrive into a physical body, the incarnation, the egg and the sperm come and create the one cell and then move into the implantation and into the embryological time, the gestation. If during this time there's some kind of an imprint, you imagine the flow, the flow, the flow, boom, something stops. And it might be an injury, it might be a feeling all the way to death. Like if there's a twin who has come with me into my conception and at some point they leave, there can be range of regulation, hyper or hypo or double bind experiences that go along with any kind of loss or death at this time. And I myself could feel, am I alive? Am I dead? Because there's a oneness with the entire field at that time, not just who's right next to me as my twin, but who is my mother, who is my father, what is the family, what is that? Because incarnation is a call and response experience. There's an entire toroidal field that you're called into. So it's not just rugged individualism of I will incarnate. It is actually a call and response, and there's a fitting into the whole mandala of creation of you at that time. And the being pulls in all that is. And so through gestation, also, if the child is beginning to come out and something happens, the body can hold that as a scoliosis or something. It can hold it as a, or not even uh, as a physiological pattern of every time I'm moving into something, I seem to get startled and smaller.
Mm.
Tiny experiences, not tiny, smaller experiences than complete death, I would say,
Mhm.
or all the way to I don't exist. Nobody's ever going to see me. Nobody's ever going to see any evidence of my existence. Did you need a physical address to send that to? Who are you? Great suspicion of all moments of life. How amazing would it be to flow through in a trusting fashion,
Mm.
which is unheard of for many humans?
There are for us a lot of stumbling blocks, and when
Yeah.
I listen to this call and response, I also feel, well, then there would be a lot of like influence on our incarnation, created by how are we called in, and by what field, not just the two parents, but the whole field that is inviting us. Is it inviting us,
Yeah.
or are we an accident or unwanted or whatever experience? Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually, from a different perspective, like a soul level perspective, you could see, oh, soul lesson, oh, soul contract. But while you're in the deep, in the middle of it and under the imprints, that can feel like density. and it can feel like victim. And so I, as an inside person, have the experience of my own body and my own imprints that I'm living within. Thank goodness for any practitioner who could possibly hold me through me being the inside one and not just looking at everything from an eagle's eye perspective, which is so useful at some points, but it's not useful for reaching states and symptoms from the inside to work with them.
Mm,
This is also why every practitioner who comes to alchemical alignment is both outside person and inside person, because otherwise you get way out of balance. If you don't get into the inside person role enough, you will have early patterns that are compensating for how you do the work that will become chronic symptoms,
mm,
which I've seen over and over and over again in practitioners. And, you know, blessings upon all of us. We're evolving as quickly as we each can. And I'm here to bring the message of please get into both roles. It's an Aikido model of taking both sides.
mhm. Be the one that holds and also be the one that is being held.
Okay.
Yeah. When I was working with you in one-on-one sessions, what was amazing to me, first of all, I brought you these, in my awareness, like huge, just walls and worlds of energy. And I didn't know how to frame it. I was lost in death and maybe also lost in birth imprints and various, disalignments with life. And what was amazing to me is, well, there's a person who can look at that mess or that whatever and see, ooh, there's maybe, oh, there's life, there's death, there's this, there's that. So, like, you had this map, and it was amazing to me that there wasn't a lot of doing, big doing, like we do this technique now, and now it's this and training. And so there was a lot of just you being present, knowing where I was, telling me where I was. That allowed me to go on. And sometimes I thought, well, what did we do? But magic happened. Just it's, for me, I don't know if you experience it the same with other people as well, but I found it to be a very subtle work with very subtle interventions.
Yeah. Yeah. So when people go into the fight and flight places, sometimes you need to have physical strength, like a push exercise, I'm sure is popular around the whole planet of, finding your own body. And I've done decades of Aikido practice where we find how much power can you bring into one moment with the lightest touch. How can it blend with the other human so that it's not a muscle activity, but it's a key activity, ki or chi or prana, a life energy activity where we can lean in or blend in or make enough space or something like that so that it's more in harmony than greatest activation. And there's space for all of it. It's all important.
Mhm. The
Yeah.
more
So
dynamic
yeah.
pieces can come into that, but there could be a lot of subtleness and
Yeah.
even just being there. And
Yeah.
could you say something about the tides also, that like waiting for the natural tides to return?
So if even now we and anyone listening to this if you could expand your awareness to nature around you and notice if you feel furniture in the room, there's a certain amount of feedback from that. And then if you expand further to nature, it's alive and it's breathing. It's got connections into the earth and up into the sky. it moves and changes with wind and rain that comes its way. The ability to stay tuned into the natural world and its cycles, rhythms, and tides would be eventually what we would love for every human to have, especially with artificial intelligence growing and growing, which does not have the natural tides built within it. We want the humans to have the primary relationship with what in biodynamic craniosacral therapy and also biodynamic osteopathy that comes from there's primary respiration, these tides that breathe the body also. And so these things get compromised, have an inertial fulcrum within them of the shock or the ongoing strains and stresses of traumatic experience of humans, and get out of shape, out of balance. And so for a practitioner to be able to hold the wholeness, to hold the fact that tides are more intelligent than all of us and will eventually come through, that's also part of our background and focus and intention throughout alchemical alignment.
Mm. Yeah. And to feel what I sense is then that we can feel aliveness within death and birth and everything in between, that it doesn't have to be this traumatic block. It can shift and change. And maybe by doing that work, there's also a contribution to the collective, how we collectively relate to death. It could be very different, I imagine, and birth also.
Exactly. Exactly. So if we've got the movement of life in the practitioner, even while the client goes into the stasis or fixation of death to say, well, I'm dead, or this body part is dead, or this organ has taken the hit as a valiant protector of the whole, it has taken the sacrifice into itself. As the practitioner says, I acknowledge that, I meet that, and I'm going to stay alive, not overtly, not as a boundary invasion, but actually as support. I won't be making you change, but I won't actually die while you're dead because that's not going to serve you. And so eventually, slowly, that valiant protector can begin to wake up to present time and say, wait a second, I don't have to stay this way forever. And that also in the aliveness, just this past weekend, I reached a new level of aliveness, including deep levels of human DNA and cosmic consciousness. For me to over and over cultivate that type of thing is more important in my place on the earth than for me to try to change anyone else. That's part of the thought within alchemical alignment, is as within, first of all, so without. And so who are you
Mm.
deeper inside? Yeah.
Mm. Oh, what a beautiful invitation for us as practitioners to, yeah, also elevate ourselves there. Do you have an impulse to maybe also um, mention the light conception? I saw it in your description. I was like, what's that? Maybe you can share just a tiny little bit. So, because I think it's included in birth.
So the range of a human from feeling dead to presence within death to feeling kind of alive to presence within aliveness. And like, what could be the greatest aliveness in a human? Part of that is conception of new self, conception of new reality, conception of new child, conception of new, like my own womb could actually, my own brain, my own heart, my own self could actually go to a state where the aliveness of spirit gets conceived and gestated within me to be birth. onto this planet. You could keep it as a metaphor. And we're moving into a place where something that happened 2,000 years ago with one being, which is a really popular story on the planet and really powerful, we're moving into a time when in 1 year there could be 2,000 such things, as opposed to 2,000 years ago. In 1 year, we could have 2,000 new conceptions of light beings. The reason why I could say that from a grounded place is that I experienced that within my body. It brought me to the edge of insanity because it was so powerful that it brought up all my deepest difficulties, which light does. As you move deeper into being light, the densities, the darknesses, the misqualified energies, the old trauma imprints, ask for attention so that you can include them and up-level them. They have to be moved through in order to be all of who you can be, a spirit in a human body. Some people are not going to do that because they'll stay maybe in a higher level of consciousness, but not necessarily bring all of themselves to that. And some people will stay maybe in a more embodied, high vibration place, but not necessarily go to a place of consciousness, which is an interesting range for humanity at this time. And what we're saying is that actually you could have it all, the light being and the human being and the blend of them and the conception and gestation of a completely new level of human
Mm. Mm.
light from conception onward, as opposed to like the soul enters later. It's actually an ascended master level from the beginning on.
Yeah. I think there was a harsh separation also in the past when souls would come in, like, I have to leave a part of my consciousness and my wisdom and my wholeness behind, just like a tiny, like a very narrow door, and just a tiny part of my luggage can even fit. And I think what we are doing is we came that way, probably most of us, and now we we are getting the luggage delivered, like part after part. Oh, here's another bit of me. Oh, here's more of me. But the idea that in the future it would be possible to not suffer through that harsh separation, to stay conscious, to be here fully. And I think that would be very, very intense for anyone to receive that or hold that. And that maybe it's good that we as practitioners like slowly enter that field and like get the training wheels and try out different areas and see what's possible.
Exactly. Yeah, it's similar to the Essenes of long ago who were daily practicing purification rituals and up-leveling self, things like that. I am not saying that I am like them. I'm happy not to be because of enjoying many things on the human planet. I think that the range is different now, and the current reality is different than then. And what is possible for us now as practitioners, as parents, as humans, the everyday reality that we have had, plus embodiment of spirit, gets to be a new exploration. We are not trying to be them, we get to be us and more. Like as more and more of you arrives in present time with every piece of trauma resolution work that we do, there's more self present for participating in human life.
Mm. Yay, that sounds incredible. Oh, thank you so much. I got all my questions answered, and maybe some like a very mundane question could be for someone who is listening and feeling called to participate, to say, wow, I want to be part of that wave of evolution that's going on right now. what should they do? Should they write you an email, or is there some button on the website or some
I was
further?
thinking they get to listen for their next doable piece.
Mhm.
Because the important thing is that a human body has the next piece of capacity that you want to be careful not to be like Icarus, who's going up with your potential up to the sun, the mind body split of, I know I can do this, and then crash into the ocean. What is your next doable piece? Is it modules 1 through 7 of alchemical alignment? Maybe. Is it your own personal work for a little while and then a different foundational program and then alchemical alignment? It's not for everybody. And so just feeling for, wow, what is my next doable piece? Yes, that's great. And alchemicalalignment.com is the website.
Mhm.
Monthly sessions for practitioners and advanced students or advanced clients of somatic work. You'll find that on the website as well. We have a book coming out soon to describe all of the physiology and the freeze levels, possibly this fall.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I look forward to that. Thank you, Brigit. Thank you so much for the work that you do and how you bring it into the world and make it available. And it was very touching for me to hear you mention the scenes. I just recorded a podcast for next week mentioning them because I felt we are in a similar, just a similar dynamic, totally different, but there's some similarity. And I called it like welcoming the light or bringing the light to earth. And yeah.
We have availability of Essenes, Arthurians, Atlanteans, Lemurians, original DNA seeding. We have more and more and more and more available to us, hybrid realities, etc. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brigit. Thank you.